All righty. Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you so much for joining me. My name's CJ Curry. This is the CJ Curry Show. Yeah, I have my own show, and it's named after me, yours truly, the host with the most. Appreciate everybody being here. Make sure you're subscribed. Make sure you slap that like button if you haven't yet. We're going to be talking all things NFL today. Taking a look ahead up at the Week 2 Sunday slate of NFL games, talking some player props. I've got a list of a few popular player props that I see going around the industry, so we're going to do some research on those. If you guys have any questions, I'm here to help you and help answer all your player prop and pick questions over on PrizePicks. So appreciate everybody for being here. How'd last night go for you guys? Did you guys enjoy that game last night? I thought it was kind of a stinker, especially in the first half. Wasn't all too impressed with the way that NFL game played out, especially from a picks and props standpoint. I thought that things could have went a little bit better. You know, we're only in week 2, so there's still not a whole lot of information from this season for us to really take a look at. So we're having to use research and information and data from last season to help us with this season's player props. It's kind of tough, right? Early sledding in the NFL, kind of tough. It's going to take a couple of weeks for us to get some of this information, some of this data in. You know, there's been a lot of personnel changes across the NFL. There's been a lot of moves made, coaching changes. You got new young guys being drafted into these teams. You've got free agency, trades, all that stuff going on. And so things are still shaking out. We're still trying to wait and see how things play out with this NFL season. So the early weeks in the NFL, kind of tough. Usually by like week 3 or 4, though, things kind of start to smooth out. You start to get a better idea of what's happening, what a player's role is on their team, what a team's identity is on offense or defense. You know what I'm saying? So as the season goes on, things should smooth out and get a little bit easier. That's my long way of saying last night sucked. Last night absolutely sucked. I know a lot of people were on some of the Chargers receivers. I mean, Mike Williams had himself a fantastic game. There's no denying that. He was by far, you know, the stud of last night, at least from the Chargers side. Justin Herbert played pretty well as well. Austin Eckler, although he was involved, you know, he did okay. I think if you took the props for like his receptions or receiving yards, you probably did all right. Other than that, you know, not a lot to love on the Chargers side. A lot of people were on Palmer. Palmer didn't really come through, so he was kind of a flop. I was liking Carter, DeAndre Carter, I think his name is. He ended up playing pretty well. Did a pretty good job as far as covering his receiving yards. I think they were at 28.5 at one point. Ended up getting bumped up just before kickoff. So even if you took the bump, you still would have hit the over on Carter's receiving yards. Outside of that, I mean, over on the Kansas City Chiefs side of things, Pat Mahomes, kind of a quiet night for him, especially coming off of a 360-yard performance where he threw, 5 touchdowns, no interceptions. I think I had the over on his rushing yards. Pat Mahomes, 2 games in a row now, just wasn't using his feet all that much. So that's something to kind of keep an eye out on. His rushing yards last season were pretty good. This season so far, he's 0 for 2 in covering his rushing props. So we might want to stay away from Pat Mahomes and his rushing as far as, you know, him using his legs and scrambling. He's not doing a whole lot of that. Outside of that, yeah, Travis Kelce had a pretty decent night. It looks like Time Out Sports Podcast was on some Juju Smith-Schuster for the Kansas City Chiefs. Juju did not really play much of a factor last night. He was not heavily involved. Clyde Edwards-Helaire ripped off a big run. So if you took the over on Clyde Edwards-Helaire's rushing yards or the combined rushing and receiving yards, Helaire probably came through for you. Had himself a pretty good night last night. But outside of that, I mean, it was just kind of an ugly game overall. I think the total was set at 54.5 points. They didn't cover that. These two teams did not combine for 55 or more points. They ended up with like 51 or something like that. So those Thursday night games are a little bit tricky. We've had 2 bangers, though, as far as matchups go. So we'll have to look in and see how things go going forward, though. But shout out to everybody for joining me in the live stream. I see Throwbacks is here. Appreciate you being here, my friend. Mac B says, run them likes up for my boy. Shout out to the Patreon fam. Yeah, speaking of Patreon, last night's MLB picks were on fire. We went 4-1-1. 4-1-1 on MLB props. So the NFL might have treated us poorly, but the MLB props ended up coming through pretty solid. A lot of folks cashed, posted a winning 3-pick entry on PrizePicks. So shout out to those who tailed and ended up hitting that entry. made some money, at least 2.25x. If you powered it, well, you hit 5x. So MLB's been pretty good lately. Can't lie. Shout out to David. He's in the building. Another one of our Patreon members. We got J Crankin or JC Rankin 22. He says the first half was bad for sports betting overs. Absolutely. Terrible last night. Just wasn't all that impressed. T-Bone says, yo, at the money, homie. I see you. Nick Guthrie's in the building. Good morning to you. Desmond says, what's good? I got a couple of plays I like when it's time. Cool. I've got a list of about 5 or 6 that are looking like popular plays across the industry. I've kind of scraped different sites, different resources, and made a little sheet here. We're going to take a look at those plays. Maybe one of the plays that I'm on is a play that you're on. So we'll have to take a look at what you got cooking up. Desmond's always on top of his game, though, when it comes to the player prop stuff. So let's get into playing some Weddle real quick. Maybe you guys can help me solve today's NFL mystery player. That's what Weddle's all about. So we could start off by guessing any player that we want in the NFL. We get a total of 8 guesses. So far, the slate is blank, but I'll start off with the GOAT. How about we go with Tom Brady as our first guess? And we didn't hit anything on this, guys. It's definitely not Tom Brady. Definitely not anybody who plays on the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. In fact, it's somebody in the AFC. It's not even an NFC player, and it's not a quarterback. This player is shorter than 6'4". They're a lot younger than 45 years old, and their jersey number is one that is below number 12. So I'm going to guess that this is probably, most likely, a wide receiver in the AFC. Younger guy, obviously, a lot younger than Tom Brady. That's not saying a whole lot. Brady, one of the oldest players, maybe the oldest player in the NFL. So we got to guess an AFC player who's not a quarterback. I think that's just the logical next step. Who's got a single-digit jersey number? We talked about Juju Smith-Schuster. I know he's got a single-digit jersey number. Well, there we go. Making some progress here. It's a player in the AFC, like we've determined, but it's not an AFC West player. It's a wide receiver. It's somebody who is under 6'1". So we're talking about a pretty short guy here, right? Under 6'1", and under the age of 25. So a young player, probably a first, second year player, whose jersey number is under number 9. Chase who? Jamar Chase? Chase Claypool? Who are we talking about? Chase Edmonds? No, he's a running back, not a wide receiver. You guys are saying Jamar Chase. I think you're saying Jamar Chase. Ha! Either you guys are cheating. Don't be cheating now. Don't come here cheating, playing Weddle without me. All right? But that was a good guess. For those of you who said Jamar Chase, you got it right. Shout out to Chris. Shout out to David. Got to be more specific, though. There's a lot of guys with the name Chase out there. I mean, Chase Daniel, we saw him come into the game for a moment last night. When Justin Herbert went down with that rib injury, he was grabbing at his rib cage. Chase Daniel came in. That's another Chase. But you guys got it right. It is Jamar Chase. Shout out to you guys. Only 3 guesses today. Not bad. Not too shabby. The next thing that I saw that was kind of interesting here is ESPN tweeted this out. I guess it's a thing that they've got going on with State Farm here, where you get $12 basically, and you could build an offensive core to start your franchise using $12. And of course, like most of these things, they've got different tiers: $1 tier, $2 tier, $3, $4, and $5 tier. So I thought this was kind of interesting. I mean, for me, if I'm building a team, I'm starting with the quarterback position. I'm not going to skimp out at quarterback. So your quarterback options, I mean, you got Pat Mahomes at $5. You know, he's the creme de la creme, top of the heap, right? You got Lamar Jackson for $4, Joe Burrow for $3. You got Jalen Hurts for $2, and you got Trey Lance down at the bottom. I know you guys can't really see it well. Trey Lance for $1. So if I'm spending my money, I want to spend up at quarterback. That's just me, though. And I think, you know, I'm an Eagles fan. Jalen Hurts for $2 wouldn't be bad, but we're still kind of taking the wait and see approach on Jalen Hurts, right? We don't know what Jalen Hurts is just yet. He had a great week 1. We know that he can run the ball. He's got legs. I mean, if I'm choosing between Jalen Hurts and Lamar Jackson, I think I would take Hurts for $2 versus Lamar Jackson at $4. I'm just saying. Joe Burrow, another young guy. Trey Lance, even more unproven and young. I'm going to spend up here. I'm going to spend the $5 and build my franchise around Patrick Mahomes. He's going to be my star, my cornerstone. What do you guys think? Is that a good place to spend $5 on Pat Mahomes? I feel like we could find somebody close to Jonathan Taylor for less money. I feel like Cooper Kupp, as good as he is, he might just be kind of a guy who's good in the system that he's in as a slot receiver. If he lined up on the outside going against the best cover corners on the opposing team, would he have the type of production that he's had? I think for me, I'm starting things off with Patrick Mahomes at $5. So that doesn't leave me with a whole lot of money to spend elsewhere. What running back options do we have on the board? Well, we got Jonathan Taylor of the Colts for $5. We talked about him. Dalvin Cook for $4. DeAndre Swift for $3. Najee Harris for $2. I mean, I'm kind of digging Najee Harris for $2, y'all. And then down at the bottom, you can't see him. It's Josh Jacobs. He's hiding behind my big body. Josh Jacobs for $1. I think I'm good on Josh Jacobs. I think probably for me, Najee Harris at $2 seems like a good value play. So that's $7, right? $7. So I got me a quarterback. I got me a running back with Najee Harris. Now I can choose me a wide receiver, right? I got $5 to spend at wide receiver. Who am I going with? Rashad Bateman for $1? I mean, that would be a good deep threat for Pat Mahomes to throw to. Najee sucks. We got David in here saying Najee Harris sucks. You'd have to give me $2 to take Najee Harris. Woo. Would you rather have Josh Jacobs for $1 or DeAndre Swift for $3? I didn't know Najee Harris sucks. Man, that's we'll call that a hot take. I don't think Najee Harris sucks. Second year. Najee doesn't pass the eye test. Wow. Get some hate here for Najee Harris. Listen, I'm going Najee Harris for $2. You build your own damn team. All right? DeAndre Swift, he's been a little bit injury prone. Dalvin Cook, a little bit injury prone. But I'm going Mahomes and Najee Harris. All right? That's my $7 so far. So I got $5 more to spend. I think Kyle Pitts for $1 at tight end. Tremendous value. Darren Waller for $2. Tremendous value there too. I'm okay on Kittle. I'm going to pass on Kittle. Not really so interested in him or Mark Andrews. I think Darren Waller or Kyle Pitts for $1 or $2 seems like a move. Seems like an absolute move. So let me go Stephon Diggs for $4 and Kyle Pitts for $1. I'm feeling that. Pat Mahomes at quarterback under center. Behind him, Najee Harris, a running back who's young, big, durable, strong, can do a little bit of everything. Run, receive, right? Stephon Diggs. And then we're going to finish it off with Kyle Pitts. I think I stayed under $12, right? It's my math right? $7, $11, yeah, $12. I think that's my team. That's my squad. Pitts is a steal at $1, right? T-Bone knows what's up. Oh, Desmond, you went with the same squad. Let me see. You picked the same squad as me, bro? Wow. The same. All right, Desmond, great minds think alike. I'm with you on that one. All right, gang. Let's get down to the bee's knees here and take a look and see what we got going on today over on PrizePicks. Got a big NFL weekend ahead of us. So let's start with some prop action, right? Some picks over on the lovely PrizePicks. If you guys don't play on PrizePicks yet, yes, promo code Curry still getting you the 100% instant deposit match up to $100. If you've never played, deposited on PrizePicks before, it's a good time to do so. Also, if you want to save 25% on your first month of Props.Cash, code Curry also gets you that discount. Check out Props.Cash. They got you covered for NFL, for MLB, and for the upcoming NBA season and more. Check it out, man. Props.Cash is the move. All right. So I mentioned to you guys that I've looked around the industry, saw some different player props that people seem to be very high on, highly touted player props. Kind of tipped my hat a little bit. If you guys saw the thumbnail for today's live stream, you know what I'm talking about. We had Cooper Kupp as one of the featured players on the thumbnail. Standing next to him was Davante Adams of the Las Vegas Raiders. So we'll run through this list real quick. A couple of few props that I saw. Like I said, popular plays across the industry. Might be ones you want to take. We're going to dig into it and see if these props pass the vibe check. You guys let me know if you're vibing with the props or if you're not. Love to get your feedback, chat. So let's start things off with the guy who was featured on the thumbnail. We're talking about Mr. Cooper Kupp. And how could we not be on Cooper Kupp? His receiving yards, 93.5 receiving yards on PrizePicks. So let's go find Cooper Kupp. Obviously, I can't seem to locate him here just by scrolling. So we got Cooper Kupp at 93.5 receiving yards over on PrizePicks. So, obviously, this guy, household name, ain't got to say too much about Cooper Kupp. What is there to say? He's going up against the Atlanta Falcons this week. Probably a pretty darn good matchup, right? Our hope is that he gets the job done. I'm a little worried that maybe the Falcons fall behind here. Maybe they fall behind and then the Rams don't have to pass quite as much. A little bit worried about that, going to be honest with you. But the Rams, they need to come back, right? They need to bounce back after what was a stinker of a game against the Buffalo Bills. So I think we could take a look at Cooper Kupp here at 93.5 receiving yards. So again, we're going to be using Prop.Cash. I'm going to go to the receiving section here. I'm going to flip this from all games. I like to just narrow it down and look at, just this game. So we got Cooper Kupp, 93.5 receiving yards. We dial him down on props.cash, and you can kind of see what Cooper Kupp's been up to. We're going to have to rely heavily on what happened last season. So at 93.5 receiving yards, Cooper Kupp, 18 for 22, 82% hit rate at 93.5 receiving yards. So that's a very good hit rate. And the games that he missed, a couple of these he narrowly missed, right? 92 yards against Seattle last season, 92 yards in his last game against Cincinnati. So he's going to be up there. He's going to be heavily involved. So I could see why the industry, some of these sharp folks in the industry would be on Cooper Kupp at 93.5 receiving yards. Atlanta is going to be the visiting team, so LA is going to be at home. We could even take this a step further and just look and see how Cooper Kupp does with 93.5 receiving yards when he plays at home. 82% hit rate. We saw what he did against Buffalo. 128 receiving yards in week 1. 9 for 11, though, in his last 11 home games. 82% hit rate. So Cooper Kupp at 93.5 receiving yards, looking like a pretty good move here, especially playing at home. No games against Atlanta for us to really reference, so we don't really need to worry about that. Cool thing that props.cash has as well, it kind of shows you some of the receivers against Atlanta and how they've performed. Jarvis Landry obviously tore Atlanta a new one in week 1. 114 receiving yards for Jarvis Landry. So if Landry can have that type of success, right, maybe Cooper Kupp can too. Both guys kind of like your slot receiver, right? So things looking pretty good here for Cooper Kupp. Just jumping ahead here, we can take a look at the wide receiver position. This is from last season. We're going to see how many receiving yards per game that the Atlanta Falcons were giving up to wide receivers last year. So we pull that up. We find the Atlanta Falcons. Boy, my eyes are just not working. There they are. Boom. Kind of like right in the middle of the league. You can see they give up over 157 receiving yards per game to opposing wide receivers. So I'm not mad. It's kind of a neutral matchup, kind of an average matchup, not a positive, but also not a negative matchup for Cooper Kupp. So what do we think so far, gang? We in with Cooper Kupp over receiving yards, or are we out with Cooper Kupp receiving yards? I think so far he's passing the vibe check for me. I think he passes the vibe check for me so far. I don't mind Cooper Kupp over 93.5 receiving yards. Last but not least, let's get you a projection on this prop, and then we'll move on to some of the other ones that I saw floating around the industry today. Listen, they got Cooper Kupp projected for 87.3 receiving yards. This is Sean Curter's projection. We can look at Chris Raybon. Raybon's got about a higher number, 94.6, which is good for the over. And when you combine the two, it comes out to 91.4. So that's those two projections kind of put together, aggregated together. So 91.4 puts him in the vicinity of 93.5. We take a look at where he's at across the industry, 93.5. 96.5, 95.5 receiving yards. So we are getting kind of a lower number on Cooper Kupp at just 93.5 versus some of the other sites out there, some of the other sports books who offer this receiving line on Cooper Kupp. So there you go. I could see him having a good game. Like I said, Jarvis Landry did wonders against the Atlanta Falcons last week. Why not Cooper Kupp, right? The other one that's going to be a highly controversial play is Tom Brady's passing yards. 275.5 passing yards is the line for Tom Brady. We saw what he did against Dallas in week 1, just 212 passing yards, fell way short of 275.5, and he's going up against his division foe, right? The New Orleans Saints. Brady's record against the New Orleans Saints since joining the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, not all that good. I don't think he's beaten them but once in the playoffs in that Super Bowl run. I think that's the only one. As my man, Mr. Crankin, I'm just going to call you Crankin, man. I don't know if it's JC Rankin or Jay Crankin. I think Crankin sounds cool. But as he mentions, the New Orleans Saints own Tom Brady. Listen, I've seen some people bold enough to say take the over on Tom Brady at 275.5 passing yards. I've seen some people say take the under or less. They think Tom Brady's going to throw for less than 275.5 passing yards. So it seems like the public is kind of torn on this prop. You got one crowd, one group who says take the over. You got another group that says take the under. We know Chris Godwin not going to suit up for this game. No Chris Godwin for this game. But they do have Russell Gage, who's healthy. Julio Jones looked pretty good. And you can't forget about Mike Evans. Mike Evans is still a major factor in this offense. But Mike Evans is going to be covered up by Marshawn Lattimore, right? Lattimore, always a thorn in the side of number 13, Big Mike Evans. So maybe we look elsewhere as far as receiving props go on this Tampa Bay Buccaneers side of things. Maybe we forget about Evans, or we take unders on Evans and we look toward a guy like Gage, Julio Jones. Maybe you look at one of the tight ends. Cameron Brate, I guess, would be your top option at tight end. David says, just go ahead and take Tom Brady to throw an interception or get sacked 3 times. They get the Saints defense up for over or more than 2.5 sacks. That's a way that you could go too. You could take the entire New Orleans Saints defense and just click the over or more than 2.5 sacks. So, like I said, it seems like the public is kind of torn on Tom Brady here at 275.5 passing yards. Let's go ahead and pull Brady up here using props.cash once again to access this data, his game logs from this season. We've only got one game against Dallas. You could also take a look at some of the previous games from last season, previous matchups against the New Orleans Saints here. Here's a question for you. Who do you guys think has a better game? Is it Tom Brady or is it Jameis Winston? Who has the better game out of the 2 quarterbacks from this game? There's also that revenge factor, I guess you could say, for Jameis Winston, right? Former Tampa Bay Buccaneer. Had some great moments with the Bucs. Also had some really bad moments with the Bucs. You football fans out there, you know what I'm talking about. You Bucs fans especially know what I'm talking about. But who has the better game in this game? Tom Brady? Jameis Winston? Who do you think comes out on top in this head-to-head matchup? That'll be an interesting one to watch. Winston had kind of a slow start in the first half of week 1. But then came out in the second half and put it together, started putting up some pretty good numbers, had himself a pretty good week 1. But anyway, back to Tom Brady here at 275.5 passing yards, 11 for 20. Let's make sure we're dialed in here on props.cash. You can bump that down to get this custom line of 275.5. You can see Brady over the last 20 games that he's appeared in, 12 of 20, 60%. So it's more than 50%. Not bad. We're not hating the hit rates here. Not hating them. You can go back and look at how he's done against the New Orleans Saints over his last couple of games. 375 passing yards back on October 31st of last season. 375 at New Orleans. That was a road game. But then, in their rematch, December 19th, just 214 passing yards for an average of 294.5. Now, we could also look at more historical games here for Tom Brady. And you can see that in his last 5 games against the New Orleans Saints, just 1 for 5 or 20%. Not a very good hit rate, an average of 247.2 272 passing yards per game. That's a whole lot lower than 275.5. So yes, those of you out there who say take the under on Tom Brady or Tom Brady struggles against the New Orleans Saints, the data doesn't lie, right? Men lie, women lie, numbers don't. Well, the numbers are right here in your face, and you can kind of see Tom Brady has had his struggles in his last 5 games against New Orleans. Now, if you wanted to take this a step further, listen, you could go ahead and turn on the home away filter here. Take a look at his splits. Does he play better at home or away? Well, he's going to be on the road for this one. So away games against the New Orleans Saints, 239, 199, 375. So he's won for his last 3 against New Orleans when playing in New Orleans. So there you go. Kind of gives you an idea of what to expect for Tom Brady. If you wanted to just look at overall, how does he do versus home versus the road? Well, 284.5 passing yards at home versus 305 passing yards on the road. So he does tend to throw the ball a little bit more when he's playing on the road. So listen, I could see why people are torn here, why you got a group that says take the over and you got another group that says take the under, right? I could see why people are a little torn on this prop. Let's go back to look at last season defensive rankings here for the New Orleans Saints on a per game basis. We'll go to the passing category, the yards per game. And we find the New Orleans Saints, they're kind of down toward the middle of the pack. I mean, New Orleans not giving up a whole ton of passing yards per game, 243 per game. 243 passing yards per game. That's less than 275.5. So New Orleans last season, this is last season's data. That's what we got to work with here. 243 per game. That's a whole lot less than 275.5. So, yeah. Last but not least, let's get you a projection on this particular prop here. We're going to go over to the passing yards section. We're going to punch in Tom Brady's name. They've got him projected for a consensus 272.5, which is less than 275.5 across the industry. Various sports books have him at 273.5, 276.5, 277.5. So we're kind of getting a middle number here. PrizePicks has kind of split the difference down the middle at 275.5. It's not 277.5. It's not 273.5. It's kind of a number right there in the middle. So there you go. Tom Brady historically has struggled against the New Orleans Saints. Looking like it's going to be another one of those tough games. All right. Outside of Tom Brady, what was some of these other props? Well, I saw one that was really popular around the industry. It was Courtland Sutton's receiving yards. Courtland Sutton's receiving yards at 56.5. Oh, I keep seeing messages getting deleted here. I'm going to have to take a look at my at this bot that I have. I don't know why your messages are getting deleted if you're like maybe putting too much text in at once in the chat. I'll have to take a look at that, but I see your messages are being deleted here. Anyway, Courtland Sutton at 56.5 receiving yards. I see a lot of people thinking that he's going to go for more than this. So 57 or more receiving yards for Courtland Sutton. Been a very popular play. I've seen it in multiple places from very sharp people in the industry. So we're going to take a look at this one a little bit closer here. Put it under the microscope, under the magnifying glass, so to speak, right? We know Russell Wilson's in town. He's throwing the football now in Denver, so that can definitely help a receiver out when Russ is playing at his best. So let's go pull Courtland Sutton up. Again, we're using Prop.Cash. If you don't use it, you're doing yourself a disservice. They all like Najee Harris, and the bot thinks it's spam. We'll have to talk about that offline. You're going to have to tell me what in the world that means. But anyway, Courtland Sutton at 56.5 receiving yards. Super talented receiver. Has dealt with his fair share of injuries. So you can kind of take a look what he's been up to over the last, season or so. At 56.5 on PrizePicks, a little bit higher than the default number on Props.Cash, which was 54.5. So we bumped him up to 56.5. You take a look, 6 out of his last 10 games, 60% hit rate. Week 1 against the Seattle Seahawks, hauled in 72 receiving yards. 72 receiving yards. So not bad. Week 1 debut. Seattle kind of gave Russell Wilson and the Denver Broncos offense some problems, right? But they could not keep Courtland Sutton down. 72 receiving yards would be plenty for him to blow past 56.5. So that kind of gives you an idea of what to expect possibly from Courtland Sutton. Now, if we take a look at last season, the Houston Texans defense, typically not one that is very scary, not one that that limits, rather, opposing offenses in any type of category. Going back to last season, they gave up almost 170 receiving yards per game to opposing wide receivers. That's the sixth most given up to wide receivers last season. So Courtland Sutton at 56.5, looking pretty good here. Pretty soft matchup from what we can tell from last season, with the Houston Texans being at the sixth most receiving yards allowed per game to opposing wide receivers. So I'm not mad at that one whatsoever. I could see Russell Wilson and the Denver Broncos looking to kind of get back on track. Things did not quite go as good as they had hoped. And then as far as the projection on Courtland Sutton, they've got him right there, man. Right around 55.2 receiving yards. If you're looking at the various sports books out there, most of the books have him at 54.5. 54.5, a little bit lower than where he is at on PrizePicks. They all are at 54.5, so not even a spread or a range here. All of them have him at 54.5, so you're paying like a 2-yard premium, which doesn't sound like a whole lot. It's probably realistically not a whole lot different. But yeah, a little bit higher on PrizePicks than some of these other sites. But at 54.5, you could see like on a site like DraftKings, big betting favorite. The public liking him to go for more than 54.5, 56.5. It's close enough for me to say, yeah, go ahead. If you like it at 54.5, 56.5, couple more yards, probably won't be a deal breaker for me. What do we think though? Courtland Sutton, vibe check. We liking it or are we not liking it? Does he pass the vibe check for you going up against the Houston Texans? Know what we know from last season? Very giving defense. They're not really stopping or slowing anybody down. Is anybody going to stand in Courtland Sutton's way? Not today, but this weekend? I don't know. I don't think so. I'm not really worried about the Houston Texans. So there's Courtland Sutton for you. I got 3 more props. Next one's going to be Saquon Barkley. I'm seeing a lot of people showing Saquon Barkley some love. Barkley had himself a very good week 1, so I can definitely understand why people in the industry are high on Saquon Barkley. In this case, we're talking Saquon Barkley for rushing yards at 74.5. He had 164 rushing yards against the Tennessee Titans in week 1. Saquon Barkley at 74.5 rushing yards. Desmond says, I am tripping. I meant Barkley over 74.5. So are you feeling this guy? Saquon Barkley, is he passing the vibe check for you going up against the Carolina Panthers? 74.5. We rocking with it or nah? You let me know, Desmond. You let me know. Let's go to props.cash. Switch this up from the receiving category to the rushing category. We're going to punch this New York Giants game in. Carolina versus the Giants. Got 2 good running backs in this game. Christian McCaffrey, obviously, for Carolina. Saquon Barkley on the other side of this one. Barkley, 80.5 by default on props.cash. Make sure you're bumping this down so that you get an apples to apples number of where he's at on PrizePicks. We dial him down to 74.5. You're going to look at his game logs and be like, ooh, that's ugly. Just 2 for his last 10, 20% hit rate. Why on earth would we want to take Saquon Barkley? Look, last season wasn't the best season for Saquon. Banged up, not the same guy, but man, he's looking like a whole new dude this season. Lost a little bit of weight, got trim and slim, came out with 164 rushing yards against a Mike Vrabel-led Tennessee Titans defense, right? So I'm not too mad at Saquon Barkley here at just 74.5 rushing yards. I mean, he went over double that in week 1. So that's not looking too bad. 164 rushing yards in week 1. Surely he can crank out 75 on the ground against Carolina, right? As Desmond brings up, Nick Chubb, Kareem Hunt, and Jacoby Brissett all cleared their rushing props versus the Carolina Panthers last week. The Browns averaged 5.6 yards per carry versus Carolina. So if you think Saquon's in that same class of running back as a guy like Nick Chubb, as a guy like Kareem Hunt, then we should have a little bit of faith that Saquon Barkley can do something similar to those Cleveland Browns tailbacks, right? So let's go to the running back position. Again, kind of just using last season's stats, being that we only have 1 week under our belts in the NFL. But if we click the rushing category, we sort by greatest to least. Who's given up the most rushing yards per game to running backs last season on a per game basis? Then we go find the Carolina Panthers. They are right around the middle, we'll say, right around the middle of the pack. So not a really tough team, not a really easy team to run against, but they're giving up over 94 rushing yards per game last season. And as Desmond already astutely pointed out, Cleveland had their way on the ground, over 5 yards per carry versus the Carolina Panthers. So I think Saquon Barkley passes the vibe check for me. What do you guys think in the chat? What do you guys think in the comments section? If you're watching the replay, leave a comment down below. I don't forget about you guys. My hashtag replay gang. I don't forget about you guys, all right? If you're watching the replay, let me know what you think. Saquon Barkley, over or under at 74.5? Let's get you a projection here. Again, really sharp models provided by Fantasy Labs. We got Saquon Barkley. His projected rushing yards are at 68, a little bit light. A little bit on the lower side, I guess we'll say. He's under 74.5 according to these projection models. But if you take a look at some of the sports books out there, they got him anywhere from 75.5 as high as 77.5. So we are seeing some value here at just 74.5, getting a pretty friendly number if you're playing on PrizePicks. So Saquon Barkley, it looks like it passes Desmond's vibe check. He gave it the big thumbs up, the green light go. So Saquon Barkley, another popular play that I've been seeing around the industry. Now, if you guys paid attention to today's thumbnail, we already talked about one guy who was featured on the thumbnail. That's Cooper Kupp. The other guy that was standing next to him, also a pretty prolific wide receiver in his own right. And we're talking about this guy, former Green Bay Packer, Davante Adams at 92.5 receiving yards, going up against the Arizona Cardinals. Now, we saw what happened to the Arizona Cardinals in week 1. They faced off against Patrick Mahomes and the Kansas City Chiefs, and Patrick Mahomes threw for 360 yards and 5 touchdowns through the air. So the Arizona Cardinals weren't really putting up much resistance, much of a fight. Now, I'm going to go out on a limb and say that Davante Adams is better than any wide receiver that the Kansas City Chiefs have on their roster right now. Davante Adams, much better talent, right? So if they couldn't hold down some of these Kansas City receivers who aren't on the level of Davante Adams, then I think Davante Adams should be in line for a pretty darn good week going up against the Arizona Cardinals. What do you guys think? Those of you who are here in the live chat, those of you who are watching the replay in the comments section, Davante Adams, Las Vegas Raiders receiver, put up over 140 receiving yards in week 1 against the Los Angeles Chargers. Does he run it back? 92.5 is a pretty big number, but Davante Adams, Derek Carr seem to be on the same page after 1 week. So let's go look at Tay, the man that is affectionately known as Tay, Davante Adams. Las Vegas is going to be playing at home in this one, hosting the Arizona Cardinals. Of course, we don't have a lot of data here for Davante Adams. He's only played 1 game as a member of the Raiders, at least in the regular season. But as I mentioned, 141 receiving yards against a pretty tough Chargers team. Nobody was really stopping Davante Adams on the Chargers. Nobody was really stopping the Kansas City Chiefs on the Arizona Cardinals either. So I tend to think that this guy's just going to do whatever he wants out there, him and Carr. Timeout Sports Podcast says his family is coming this week. He should get 100 plus. So we got a family narrative cooking on this one. You're saying Davante Adams' family will be present for this game? Is that what we're talking about here? The Adams family? Do-do-do-do. 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 All right, I took it too far. That's the Adams family theme, though. You're saying Davante Adams' family's going to be there. His grandparents specifically will be there for his first game. Well, then, I'm all over it. We got to be on the over for Davante Adams and his receiving yards at 92.5, right? He can't let grandma and grandpa down. He can't let them come to the game and see him underperform. They're going to force feed this guy the ball, right? Grandma and grandpa are going to be there. They want to see grandson Davante have himself a great game. Grandmother's going to be in attendance. All right, T-Bone, appreciate the intel. See, I had no idea. We got grandparent narrative on this prop here for Davante Adams at 92.5 receiving yards. So he crushed it in week 1 with 141. Like we talked about, the Cardinals, they didn't stop anybody from Kansas City, right? Let's just go take a look at last season wide receiver receiving yards per game given up by the Arizona Cardinals here. And we scroll, we take a look. They're giving up about 151.5 receiving yards per game. That was last season. But 151 receiving yards per game to opposing wide receivers kind of puts them like right around the middle of the pack. So not a very tough defense on paper. Davante Adams, one of the best receivers in the league. Not really mad at it. Not mad at it at all. Yeah, you could go with his targets too. Maybe you don't want the receiving yards on Adams. That's cool. You could look at his targets. You could look at his receptions. There's a lot of different ways to play Davante Adams. So let's go take a look at Davante Adams and his receiving yards projection. Adams is going to be the man, right? He's going to be the man with grandma out there. 84.3 projected receiving yards. Come on, that seems a little bit light. We're looking at the various sports books out here. They got Davante Adams at 93.5, 94.5. We're getting him at 92.5 on PrizePicks, a whole yard or two cheaper or less than where he's at on some of these other books. We're seeing some action, some money coming in on the over at 93.5. So if they're liking it at 93.5, guys, we should be liking it at 92.5, right? If they're confident in it at 93.5. All right. Timeout Sports Podcast says that they said Davante Adams is paying almost $500,000 for a suite for his family, for his grandparents to show up. Sheesh. All right. That's good information, man. Got Adams projected for 7 receptions. So that could be an option for you as well. If you don't want to go with the receiving yards, take Davante Adams receptions. He's at 7.5. Eventually, they'll probably put his targets up on the board too. So that'll be another way to possibly play Davante. All right, last one from me, guys. Michael Pittman of the Indianapolis Colts is getting a lot of love across the industry from what I have seen. And we're talking specifically Michael Pittman Jr.'s receiving yards. And after what he did to Houston in week 1 with 121 receiving yards, we should be liking Courtland Sutton a little bit more than what I was talking about before. If Michael Pittman Jr. was able to pull off 121 receiving yards against the Houston Texans, then Courtland Sutton and Russell Wilson should have themselves some pretty good success as well. Anyway, Michael Pittman Jr. going up against the Jacksonville Jaguars this week. He's at 61.5 on PrizePicks. I'm seeing some folks liking the over here, and for good reason. Like I said, 121 receiving yards against Houston. He gets another pretty soft matchup against Jacksonville this week. Let's go take a look at the son of one of the guys in the NFL with the greatest arms of all time, Michael Pittman Sr. This is Michael Pittman Jr., though, we're talking about here. Shout out to Michael Pittman, former Tampa Bay Buccaneer, was an Arizona Cardinal at one point. Going back in time, guys, we're jumping in the Wayback Machine. Those of you who've been following the NFL know about Michael Pittman Sr. and the Gun Show, a.k.a. his Pythons. Michael Pittman Jr., if we go back and look at last season, 11 of 18 covering this prop, 61%. Of course, last season he was playing with a different quarterback under center. It was the man who is now a commander, Carson Wentz, throwing him the football. This season, he's got Matt Ryan, so different change of quarterback. So far, it looks like it's working out pretty well for him. 121 in week 1 against Houston. But he's done a pretty good job overall. 11 for 18 in this Indianapolis Colts offense, averaging 66.8 receiving yards per game over his last 18 games. Now we can take a look and see what he's done against the Jacksonville Jaguars over the last couple of games, last 2 times he's faced them, 71 receiving yards. Again, that was with Wentz throwing him the football, 64 receiving yards with Wentz throwing him the football. So he's two of his last 2 at 61.5, and he's averaging 67.5 receiving yards per game against the Jaguars in his last 2. So I think I like what I'm seeing here with Michael Pittman Jr. Now, let's go back over here to ProFootballReference.com. Let's go find those Jags and see how many receiving yards per game they were giving up to opposing wide receivers on a per game basis last season. And it's right there around 160 per game, 159, let's call it. 159 receiving yards per game given up. No Zach Pascal in this offense anymore. No T.Y. Hilton in this offense anymore, right? Things have kind of opened up here. Michael Pittman Jr. is undoubtedly the man, the number 1 receiver. And he's going up against a team who's given up like top 10 most receiving yards per game to opposing wide receivers. A team that he had great success against last year, 2 for 2 at covering 61.5. And he's playing with a better, more adept quarterback in Matt Ryan, who he's already off to a good start with after week 1 with 121 receiving yards. I think 5. So I think Michael Pittman Jr. getting a lot of love here out on your favorite sports book. Projections pretty nice on him. Good historical hit rate, success rate against this week's opponent, the Jacksonville Jaguars. And after week 1, it's hard not to love some Michael Pittman Jr. Are you guys feeling this prop here? Michael Pittman Jr. over 61.5 receiving yards. Let me know in the chat, thumbs up or thumbs down on Michael Pittman Jr. going for at least 62 receiving yards against Jacksonville. If it passes the vibe check, let me know. Let me know. For me, I think it looks pretty good. Speaking of the chat, you guys are talking about some other props here. Kind of turn things over to you and quickly run through some of these comments that I see here. Jimmy Green says, I think we can capitalize if the number is right for some of these running backs in the first half. Okay. I see some people who do like to play first half props on PrizePicks. I think that's a great way to go. David says, kind of gross here, but what about Alvin Kamara under 26.5 receiving yards last year, combined with his games without Breeze? When Breeze was still active, Kamara failed to get 27 yards in 13 out of 21 games. He missed this number in 7 out of 11 games with Winston. Missed this number in both games versus Tampa last year. I would also add on to that he's been a little bit banged up too. In case you guys didn't know, he's questionable, I believe. So let's take a look at Alvin Kamara's receiving yards, right? We're talking Kamara receiving yards at 26.5. And David's saying that he's thinking going under on Kamara might be the move, which is kind of crazy, right? Because when you think of Alvin Kamara, at least Alvin Kamara over the last couple seasons, he's been kind of that do-it-all running back. But, you know, things ain't looking so good here. Things ain't looking so good here. AOD! Shout out to AOD. Shout out to Trill Fate as well, y'all. Trill Fate. Ain't seen you in a minute, brother. How you been? Are they doing Friday Flex Boost? Yes. You make a good point. I think at 3 p.m. Eastern time, at least that's what it was last Friday, they're taking your 5-pick flex. Instead of paying you 10x on a 5 out of 5, they're giving you 15x. At least that's how it was last week. 3 p.m. Eastern time, Friday Flex came into play. But yeah, shout out to both of you guys, man. Ain't seen y'all in a minute. Appreciate you. Yeah, NBA is going to be a whole different vibe. It's not going to be this like 2 or 3 streams a week type of thing. You know how we do it in NBA season. It's every day, 12 p.m. Eastern time. That's where you'll find me right here. But anyway, Alvin Kamara at 26.5 receiving yards. 26.5 receiving yards for Alvin Kamara. David Winker, a.k.a. Whodat, if you're in the Patreon. Shout out to my Patreon fam, by the way. Guys, if you want to join the community, we've been on fire with the MLB picks. Plus, the community members have been just going ham with CSGO, with NFL, with anything. You know, soccer. I mean, we play it all. Highlight. Join the community. Help support the show. Appreciate you guys. Just $20 a month. You win one $10 2-pick power play on PrizePicks. Bang. the $20 is paid for. Your Patreon's paid for. So if you guys are interested in that, link down in the description below. You can join Patreon, help support my content, help support the show. Appreciate all of that. Trill Fate, long time, bro. Congrats on your success. Well, thank you, man. I'm not having any success if it's not for folks like you. So I appreciate you subscribing, checking in with me, man. NBA season's right around the corner. We will definitely be switching from NFL to NBA. You know, just the daily factor of NBA, getting to do it every day, whole different vibe than NFL. I think you guys know. Those of you who rocked with me last NBA season, you know what I'm talking about. It's just a different wave. But yeah, let's take a look at this Alvin Kamara pick real quick here for my man David. He brought this one to our attention. So we'll take a glance, if we can, on this particular prop using props.cash. Let me see. Tampa Bay, New Orleans. They actually don't have anything loaded up for Alvin Kamara's receiving yards yet on props.cash. So if I'm not able to pull anything up for this particular one for you, David, then we'll just try and maybe like snag you a little projection or something. Yeah, they don't have Alvin Kamara in here yet on props.cash. It looks like it's just a couple of wide receiver props from the New Orleans side. We don't even have the Tampa Bay side loaded in. So I'm guessing that lines makers are waiting to see who's going to be active for the Bucks, who's going to be active for the Saints. I'm sure Kamara's injury status is something that's kind of holding back his prop line. So if they do release a prop for Kamara, Winker's saying, aka Hoodat, he's saying take the under on Alvin Kamara at 26.5 receiving yards. Let me see if I have a projection for Kamara. Yeah, I got him at 26.2. He's at 24.5 out on BetMGM. They're the only ones offering a prop line for his receiving yards at this point. So my man Hoodat, always doing his due diligence and research. He's saying take the under on Kamara at 26.5. So keep an eye on Kamara's health situation, his injury status, and we'll kind of see how that goes. Desmond saying he's got a couple of plays here. He's liking some Trubisky under 15.5 fantasy points. If you guys are playing fantasy props on PrizePicks and you want to look at projections for those, I would recommend you take a look at the DraftKings projections. They're not exactly the same as PrizePicks as far as the scoring, but it's the one that is the most close to how PrizePicks scores. So definitely check out if you're using a site like Fantasy Labs, or if you're using NumberFire, a free site. Make sure you're using the DraftKings projections to compare NFL. But anyway, Desmond says he's got two plays here. He's liking Trubisky under 15.5 fantasy points. Tua put up 14 fantasy points versus the Patriots last week with 270 yards and a touchdown. Trubisky only pulled up 194 passing yards, and that included overtime against Cincinnati. He is a minus 200 under 1.5 touchdowns. So he's liking Mitch Trubisky under 15.5 fantasy points. Let me pull up a projection for you. I do have the means to do that. I got Mitch Trubisky at 16 fantasy. If we take a look at where he is at on PrizePicks, we've got Trubisky sitting out there at 15.5 fantasy points. So did not cover that in week one. Finished with just 12.6 fantasy points. He's projected for 16. It's pretty close. Going up against New England this week. So my man Desmond's liking the under on Trubisky here. And that's using a DraftKings projection, which again, not exactly like PrizePicks, but most similar to PrizePicks. Second play that Desmond's liking, and this is based on just percentages, he says, are the Cowboys going for at least 3 sacks. And since these last 10 games, Joe Burrow has been sacked 3+ times in 8 out of 10 games. That's an 80% hit rate. So Cincinnati Bengals, they were supposedly upgrading their offensive line, but doesn't really seem like that's the case. And you got Micah Parsons playing that edge. He got to Tom Brady a couple times last week. I could see the Cowboys possibly getting to Joe Burrow as well. The Cowboys sacked Brady twice last week, who's notorious for a quick release plays. And Desmond says Burrow is notorious for holding on to the ball for a long time. So yeah, good little tidbit of information there. Maybe you want to go to the Dallas Cowboys and take the over on their sack line of 2.5. You could do that over on PrizePicks. Shout out to PrizePicks for making that available for us. So I like that, Desmond. I like where your head's at with that one. And last but not least, RJ Pace says, what do you think about Jonathan Taylor over 99.5 rushing yards, Mixon over 70.5, and Saquon Barkley over 74.5? Well, you must have missed us when we talked about Saquon Barkley, but I think Barkley looks like a good play over 74.5. I see some very sharp people in the industry on the over, or having Saquon Barkley rushing for more than 74.5. So you could take the more on Saquon Barkley. Taylor at 99.5 and Mixon at 70.5 were not ones that came across my screen, but we could take a look at those real quick for you. And we'll wrap the show up with those couple of plays. So Taylor's at 99.5 going up against Jacksonville. I like Taylor's teammate. We talked about Michael Pittman Jr. over receiving yards. Jonathan Taylor, though, over rushing yards at 99.5. Probably going to be a pretty good play just because it is the Jaguars and, well, it is Jonathan Taylor. And he's had some pretty good success against the Jags in the past. Let's go ahead and take a look at this real quick. Jonathan Taylor at 99.5. You can see he's 11 out of 18. 61% hit rate. Not too shabby. Averaging almost 110 rushing yards per game in that 18-game span. He came out in week 1 against Houston, put up 161 yards on the ground. So yes, Jonathan Taylor looking like a pretty strong option out of the gate so far. Looking at the last 2 games against the Jaguars, 116 at home. But on the road against Jacksonville, just 77 rushing yards. We could go back and look at some other games. 2 games on the road against Jacksonville, just 22 and 77 rushing yards. So he has went under in both road games against the Jacksonville Jaguars. That's a little scary to me. Maybe he doesn't like playing on grass. Maybe he's more of a turf guy. Maybe the turf helps with his rushing totals. I'm not sure. But he did have 253 and 116 rushing yards against Jacksonville. Again, those were at home, not on the road. So he has had his struggles against Jacksonville on the road. That's worth noting. That's not a minor detail, but let's go take a look at how Jacksonville held up last season against opposing running backs on a per game basis. We head over to the rushing column. We hit the rushing yards section and we go find Jacksonville. They're giving up about 98 yards per game to opposing running backs, which is a little bit less than 99.5. I'm not saying Jonathan Taylor's going to go under. I'm just saying this looks like kind of a tough prop. I might stay away from this one. That's an option too. If you can't get a clear read on it, if something doesn't feel right, if it doesn't pass the vibe check, get out of there. You could fade it. You don't have to play it. So Jonathan Taylor looks a little scary to me, just kind of based on his road splits against the Jacksonville Jaguars. 0 for 2 in his last couple of games, but we know what kind of talent he is. We know how good Jonathan Taylor is. I'm not saying he's a bum or that he's going to fail or that he's going to go under or that he's going to go for less than 99.5 rushing yards. I'm just saying when you have a difficult decision, sometimes it's just better to walk away instead of trying to figure it out. You know what I mean? And then your other one was Joe Mixon, who's going to be heavily involved from what it seems like for the Cincinnati Bengals. He's at 70.5 rushing yards. He opened up the season with 82 rushing yards. 2 previous games, going back to the playoffs last season, 72 and 88 yards. So he's on a 3-game streak of topping 70.5 rushing yards. We can go take a look and see how he's done just in general with this number at 70.5. Again, props.cash, making it super easy for us to take a look at these game logs. So shout out to them. Love the visualization. Love the layout on their site. So Cincinnati's going to be traveling to Dallas. Let's see what we've got here for Joe Mixon at 70.5. The hit rates get a little bit better, but still just 38%. Not a great hit rate for him. He is 3 for his last 3. He's averaging 73.8 rushing yards per game in his last 21 games that he's appeared in. Pretty good average, but it's usually feast or famine for him, right? He's not consistent. It's kind of been hit or missed. Now, the last 3 games have been consistent, but just in general here, the last 21 games, not consistent at hitting this particular number. You can also look at the splits here. How does he do at home? Well, 73.4 per game at home. How does he do away? 74.2. So it's about the same on an average basis. 74.2 versus 73.4. You're talking about less than a yard different between the two. So I don't know if I'm liking this. He's going to be involved. He's going to have his hands on the football. But it's looking a little sus to me so far. So let's find the Dallas Cowboys here and see how many rushing yards per game they allowed to opposing running backs. Again, this is last season. Still using last season's data because it's probably a little bit more accurate than one game from this season would be. But last season, the Dallas Cowboys gave about 85.6 rushing yards per game to opposing running backs. You could see where that puts them, like down toward the bottom, right? Down toward the bottom of this list. So they were kind of tough against the run last season. Kind of tough. Usually when I'm taking overs on running backs, I want those running backs to be favorites, their team to be favored to win, and I want those running backs to be playing at home. This is a little different situation. But Dallas is beat up. Maybe the Bengals pull out to a lead and they're able to kind of eat some clock toward the end of the game, run the ball with Joe Mixon, right? I could see a scenario like that playing out. Dallas can't keep up with the offensive pace that the Cincinnati Bengals are putting out. Maybe Cincinnati jumps out to a lead. Toward the end of the game, they just start feeding Joe Mixon. I could see that being a possible game script, the way that things could play out. So I don't hate Joe Mixon. It's just another one of those where it's just kind of murky. So let's get you a projection on this, and then we'll wrap things up. Appreciate you dropping those questions, though. Joe Mixon, 75 projected rushing yards. So that's more than 70.5. You take a look at where he's at across the various sports books and sites out there. 72.5 everywhere, really. 72.5 everywhere. So we're getting a little bit of a discount, a cheaper or lower line at 70.5 on Joe Mixon. RJ, you are very welcome. Appreciate you appreciating my analysis. Thank you, everybody who tuned in for this one. And you'll probably catch me again on Monday. We'll do a little recap of what happened over the weekend with the NFL games. We'll talk some Monday night football picks here on PrizePicks. And we'll go from there. You know, Monday, Wednesday, Friday type of schedule for the NFL. All right. Appreciate you, Mr. Don P. Thanks for checking in. Always appreciate the support, my friend. Until the next one, guys. Good luck. See you next week. Peace.